Hi, I'm Keon, a senior research analyst with Thomson Reuters Lipper. I'm here to speak to you about fund flows activity for the week ended Wednesday, March 8th. Let's start by taking a quick look at the market activity for the week. Both the Dow Jones Industrial Average and the S&P 500 Index suffered losses for the week. The S&P was off 1.4%, the Dow was down 1.2%. Both of the indices were hurt by what appears to be news of a near certain interest rate hike by the Fed at their meeting next week, as well as a slump in oil prices. U.S. oil closed below $50 for the first time this year as news came out of record-setting inventory levels for U.S. crude. Let's turn our attention back now to the fund flows activity. We'll start by taking a look at our fund macro groups. This week, we saw equity mutual funds had net outflows of $1.9 billion. Taxable bond funds took in $3.4 billion of net new money. Muni bond funds saw about $85 million leave, while money market funds had large net inflows for the week of approximately $11.8 billion. Moving on now, we'll take a closer look at our equity groups, starting with the mutual funds. The $1.9 billion outflow was the fourth straight weekly outflow for the group. But overall, the group is faring better this year than last. They have positive flows of over $5.7 billion for the year, while last year they had record-setting outflows of approximately $253 billion. In this week's activity, what has turned into a very long-term trend, non-domestic equity funds are responsible for all the outflows with about $2.6 billion. While non-domestic equity funds took in about $700 million in net new money. Moving on to the ETF side of the equation now, we see that equity ETFs had inflows of roughly $2.9 billion last week. It was their sixth straight week of inflows. The largest inflows belong to the iShares Core S&P 500 product and as well as the Spider S&P 500. Both were up roughly $2.1 billion, while the largest outflow belonged to the Spider Gold product at just over $250 million. Let's take a closer look at our taxable bond fund groups now, starting with mutual funds. Even in this rising interest rate environment, investors are still putting money into taxable bond funds. Had $3.4 billion in inflows last week, their 10th straight week of inflows, and they're up almost $40 billion for the year to date. The largest inflows last week belonged to the funds in the Core Plus Bond Fund peer group, took in just short of $1 billion. While second on the list was our bank loan category. Once again, they've had quite the run since the presidential election. They took in $800 million last week to raise their total since last November to just over $13.5 billion in net inflows. That wraps up the mutual funds. Let's take a look at taxable bond ETFs now. Net outflows for this group, just about $536 million left. This broke a streak of 6 straight weeks of inflows. The largest outflows last week belonged to the iShares iBox High Yield Corporate product and the iShares iBox Investment Grade Corporate product, which saw roughly $1.5 billion and $420 million leave respectively. The largest inflow was the iShares 20-plus year Treasury bond product, which took in about $365 million in net new money. Let's move on to our Muni Bond Fund group now. Second straight week of inflows for the group, but as we spoke about before, just a very small, second straight week of outflows for the group. But as we spoke about earlier, just a very small outflow, $85 million. This comes on the heels of seven straight weekly inflows for the group. Last week's activity was driven by short muni bond debt funds, which had about roughly $40 million in net outflows. Our last group to take a look at is money market funds. Money markets took in $11.8 billion in net new money last week. The largest contributors to this total was the institutional U.S. government money market group and the institutional U.S. Treasury money market group, which took in $4.7 billion and $3.1 billion respectively in net new money. Well, that wraps up this week's report. If you'd like to take a closer look at the data for yourself, please join us at our website, www.lipperusfundflows.com. And please join us here again next week where another one of our analysts will be speaking about that week's fund flows activity. you.